If dry eye is something you're managing long term, which, let's face it, often that's the case, that code recognizes the coordination and complexity required for longitudinal care. It can be stacked with your 99 codes, and especially if you have supported it by documentation. And we've talked about that documentation. I'm not going to go into that in this, but that's, again, one of the things that we've talked about and we work about with our Practice Performance Partners Pro memberships, as well as our enhanced memberships. So we take a lot of time to make sure that they understand the utilization of these codes and the documentation of these codes. And so it's not just nice to have, it reflects what we're already doing. And obviously my suspicion is, hello and welcome to the Chris Wolfe Podcast on iCode Media. Today I wanted to talk about billing and coding dry eye like a pro. We see a lot of webinars about this, and I think people make it kind of too complicated. So I wanted to break down kind of the elements of billing related to dry eye. I've seen people say that dry eye should be a level 5. I think, obviously if you're using time-based billing, and there are very specific documentation requirements for time-based billing, you might be able to get to a level 5, but probably for MDM, there's almost no scenarios, I cannot think of, I could think of maybe one scenario where MDM would get you to a level 5, but I want to provide clarity, because I think when people see that people saying, well, this should be a level 5 for a dry eye evaluation, first, you're really probably not, even at a level 5, most payers are not probably reimbursing you significantly enough to offset, for that amount of time, to offset what you could have seen if you were efficient in managing a patient with dry eye and bill based on MDM. And then the second thing is that most people are not documenting time. In my experience, when we look at auditing charts, they're not documenting time well enough to survive a scrutinized audit for their time-based billing. Now, there are ways to do it for sure. And if you want those ways, obviously we talk about them within Practice Performance Partners. For our pro members and for our enhanced members, we have lots of programs that will talk about time-based billing. But in this case, and in most cases, we're not seeing that documentation that would support a level 5. So be careful with that. So today, I want to talk about dry eye, billing, and coding. As always, be sure to subscribe to the podcast, write a review, share it with your friends, and support those who support us. The most common questions I get include, what ophthalmological codes or evaluation and management codes should I use? What ICD-10 codes do I need to bill with this CPT code? What CPT codes can be billed together and what can't? And my favorite, how do I manage a patient who has diabetes who comes in for a quote-unquote routine eye exam? These questions really highlight the confusion and uncertainty that serves as a daunting hurdle for providers, makes it more challenging for them to care for their patients and provide those patients with the best opportunity for a lifetime of ocular health and clear vision. That's why we built iCode Education, for this specific purpose. Our mission is to provide optometrists with resources to help you understand disease states, revenue cycles, and billing and coding so that you can put that on autopilot and truly care for your patients. Check out iCodeEducation.com. That's EYECODE education.com. We've developed a premier billing and coding bundle that includes all of our billing and coding resources in one place. We also have a 10% discount code just for listeners of this podcast. Enter the coupon code EYECODEMEDIA22 at checkout. We'd love to work with you. Check out iCodeEducation.com. Hello, dedicated optometrists. Are you looking for a way to support your patient's vision and overall eye health? Let me introduce you to Vision Edge Pro, a visual performance supplement that stands out in our profession. Vision Edge Pro contains a balanced blend of mesozeaxanthine, lutein, and zeaxanthine in a 10-10-2 ratio. This combination has been scientifically shown to increase macular pigment density, which enhances visual performance, including contrast sensitivity and vision in glare situations. Additionally, Vision Edge Pro provides 300 milligrams of DHA and EPA, fulfilling the daily requirements for omega-3s as recognized by the leading health organizations. This ensures your patients receive the essential nutrients their eyes need for optimal health. Whether it's for everyday screen use, night driving, or enjoying the outdoors, Vision Edge Pro supports your patients in seeing their best. Recommend Vision Edge Pro for your patients today and help them achieve clearer, healthier vision. Contact your local MacuHealth representative for more details. Vision Edge Pro, because your patients deserve the best in eye health. Go to MacuHealth.com and use the coupon code PODCAST2024 at checkout for special discounts. So how do we bill and code dry eye care in a way that is compliant, profitable, and sustainable? So if we're serious about treating dry eye, we have to be just as serious about how we bill and document it. In fact, I'm working right now with a practice that, has an excellent, the doctor in this practice is an excellent dry eye doctor. Like, seriously understands all the differential diagnosis, has available and utilizes all the treatments for patients. Patients have very good outcomes in their practice. And yet the amount of time that this doctor is spending with patients is just not sustainable for the practice. So they're taking good care of the patients, but it's not sustainable for the practice. And so it can occur even in these situations where really good doctors are not generating enough revenue for the practice to sustain that service that they're providing. So now you got to figure out ways to administer this to support the practice and also continue to support the patients. And that mostly is about time and about how much time they're spending with patients. So yes, they're level 5s, or in theory can be level 5s, but level 5s, if you're spending 40 minutes on a level 5, that additional $35 isn't enough to offset the revenue if you would be efficient and spend 15 minutes with patients that wind up being level 3s. But 15 level 3s, or 15-minute level 3s, so over the course of an hour, you can administer, level 4s, you can administer 4 level 4s or a level 5 in 40 minutes. The math just doesn't add up. And so those are the types of things that we have to think through if the math doesn't math for the amount of time that we're spending to deliver the care. And I think the bottom line is, if it's not working for the practice, then we'll stop doing that care over time. And that's not what we want to do, because we want to take care of the patient. So let's think about the structure. So again, we talked about this in the past, but it's not just nuance or checking boxes. We think about dry eye as a chronic and progressive disease that brings with it medical complexity and longitudinal care. And if I'm honest, the potential for billing chaos if we don't have that structure. So if we don't treat it with the respect it deserves, we leave money on the table, we confuse our staff, we frustrate patients who don't understand what they're being charged for. And so again, we want to stop winging it. Dry eye needs to be clear, repeatable, and we've talked about this process in last week's episode, but it's both clinical and administrative, so everybody on the team is aligned. So here's a mistake I see often and way too often, and I've been guilty of in my practice as well. We see signs of dry eye during a comprehensive exam, maybe a little staining, maybe some telangiectasia, maybe some frothy tears, and we immediately start treating and billing like it's a full dry eye workup. We divert from the comprehensive exam and quote unquote convert to medical. The problem is that usually it's not enough time to do it well. It's not supported by documentation to take some additional steps, and it leads to denials or audit risk. And so what we do instead, what we advocate for, and we talked about this last week, is to separate this identification from management during the comprehensive exam. So during that comprehensive exam, we identify the signs, general signs. We recommend step 1 therapy, as we talked about last week: warm compresses, lid hygiene, artificial tears. We document clearly and we track whether or not the patient starts treatment. For example, if we recommend a lid hygiene protocol and they pick up, Peak Pro or a similar product from our office, we take a note. That's a signal that there's a therapeutic relationship in motion. We can actually track it. You've heard me talk about tracking boxes. If I want every patient at the comprehensive exam to start on compresses, lid scrubs, artificial tears, then I ought to put that in a box and I can track how many times we've sold that box. So I can think about prevalence data. So if I saw 1,000 patients and prevalence data would suggest that 35 to 70% of those patients over the age of 40 have ocular surface disease, including meibomian gland dysfunction, then then I ought to think that 70% of those patients, if I've identified it, I've spoken to the patient, ought to have that box, so 700 boxes. But maybe we're not good enough. Maybe we miss opportunities. So maybe it's 35%, or maybe it's 20%, or maybe it's 10%. The bottom line is it becomes trackable. And so that's a signal for a therapeutic relationship, as we've discussed. And we're setting the stage for medical justification for that next visit. And then that next visit, that's the ocular surface evaluation. And that's where the real billing begins. And so I find that at that ocular surface evaluation, we can do a deeper dive. And we've done our homework at the first visit, and this is where it's clean and it's supported. So here's how we approach it. We might be at a 99214 if we're initiating a prescription therapy or, prescription medication management. So we've got multiple. So again, let's think about it this way. CooperVision and the AOA have joined forces in a groundbreaking initiative to transform how optometrists treat children with myopia. The Myopia Collective aims to unite our profession and its allies to challenge the status quo and elevate the standard of care for children with myopia. Everyone is invited to become a member of the collective. By joining, you pledge to act in slowing childhood myopia progression. Membership includes regular updates and information about the collective's efforts, access to educational opportunities and resources, and insights from the ambassador optometrists who advocate for community policy and changes supporting the collective's mission. Click the link in the show notes to join the collective today. If you're ready to stop feeling overwhelmed and start running a safer, more profitable practice, here's the next step. First, book a strategy call with us, Practice Performance Partners. We'll uncover the biggest risks and opportunities in your practice. Then, choose the package that fits your goals. From there, we'll get you launched with confidence, with clear systems, with expert support, and with peace of mind, knowing your practice is protected and set up to grow. Don't wait until something goes wrong. Book your strategy call with us, Practice Performance Partners, today. I'm not going to break down the difference, the complete difference between level 3s and level 4s, but let's just assume that these patients have multiple chronic issues. So you have a dry eye patient, a chronic issue. We think about dry eye and meibomian gland dysfunction. Those by AMA definition are two problems that are being managed at that visit. And they're both going to be around for 1 year or longer. So again, that's the problem, right? So we got to get two of the areas underneath one of the underneath a specific level in order to meet that level. So we have to meet or exceed two of the rows, problems, data, risk, underneath that level 3 or level 4. And so again, we get to a moderate type of problem if we're managing two stable chronic illnesses. So dry eye, by definition, is going to be around for a year or longer in most cases. Meibomian gland, by definition, will be around a year or longer. So AMA guidelines tell me that's a chronic problem. We're managing two stable, if they were stable, chronic problems, or one progressive chronic problem that meets a level 4 type of problem. And so then all we care about is risk of the, so documenting the risk factors and risk of the intervention. Okay, so basically we are a level 4 type of problem, and then the differential between whether or not we use a level 4 or level 3 comes down to the risk factors. Okay, so I am not saying that all we have to do is prescribe a medication. What I'm saying is that I am assuming that you've documented multiple chronic issues, whether they're stable or progressing. We're at a level 4 type of problem, and then the differential between whether or not we use a level 3 or level 4 comes down to whether or not we're or managing a prescription medication or performing an in-office procedure or performing a procedure, minor procedure, with documented risk factors, okay? And a patient or procedure who has documented risk factors. It's a level 3, a 99213, if we're still utilizing over-the-counter treatments and that risk is low. So on top of that, we might perform, and people do all the time, we might perform meibography, anterior segment imaging, right? As an example, we might perform tear osmolarity, and we might perform an MMP9. And not every patient might get all of these, but when they do, and if they do, then we use them to guide care, and we document that level of care and why those pieces of information were important in the exam, and then we escalate treatment. And again, we talked about G2211, but a lot of people miss. They're still missing G2211, and I fear that many of us will continue to miss it because we're misunderstanding the reason for that code and the utility of that code based on guidance from CMS. So if dry eye is something you're managing long term, which, let's face it, often that's the case, that code recognizes the coordination and complexity required for longitudinal care. It can be stacked with your 99 codes, and especially if you have supported it by documentation. And we've talked about that documentation. I'm not going to go into that in this, but that's, again, one of the things that we've talked about and we work about with our Practice Performance Partners Pro memberships as well as our enhanced memberships. So we take a lot of time to make sure that they understand the utilization of these codes and the documentation of these codes. And so it's not just nice to have, it reflects what we're already doing. And obviously my suspicion is, in addition to that, we're telling payers that, hey, we are managing complex conditions. We are managing serious conditions. And that justifies us kind of through our billing codes, what we're telling them verbally. So let's talk about private pay, because this comes up a ton where optometrists get tripped up. So there's a common myth, if it's cash pay, I can just create a bundled fee for the dry evaluation. I'm going to do whatever I want. Unfortunately, that's not compliant. I don't want to get bogged down too much in this, but we are obligated to use standard CPT codes. We're obligated to provide an itemized good faith estimate. We are obligated to charge consistently and actually regardless of insurance status. And so when we start to bundle a bunch of stuff, it also creates another layer of complexity for patients and for our staff in terms of administering it. So if we're in network, bill insurance. If we're out of network, we provide the same services. We use the same codes and bill this patient directly. It's transparent, it's consistent, it's defensible, and it's not gaming the system, and it's easier for our practice. And so, again, it allows us to do what's right, and allows us to, by doing what's right, allows us to easily administer the practice. Most of the breakdown in dry eye billing doesn't happen in the exam lane, it happens at the front desk. And that's why we spend our time training our team to use consistent language when scheduling ocular surface evaluations, knowing what's covered, what's not covered. We want to set clear expectations whether the visit will be billed to their insurance or some components will have a cash pay piece of it. A script that might work well is, Dr. Wolfe saw the signs of ocular surface disease today. He wants to see you back in 1 month to evaluate whether or not this treatment that you're going to start is effective, or if he needs to take additional steps. And as a side note, this portion will be said by me or by one of the doctors in the practice. And then again, now back to away from the aside, if your insurance covers the visit, then we'll bill him. If not, we'll give you a good faith estimate beforehand so you can decide how to proceed. That's not a pitch. It's informed consent. It builds trust for our patients. And I think it's important if we're going to deliver the level of care that we want to be delivered, and then also support the practice. So documentation is everything. And if we're not documenting the initiation of step 1 therapy, symptoms, risk factors, the rationale behind procedures and prescription, then we will lose. Not because our coding was wrong, but because our notes didn't back it up. And good documentation doesn't just need to be long, and it doesn't need to take a bunch of time. It just needs to be specific. It needs to be relevant. It needs to be timed to match the service. And it's not just about billing. It's about providing clinical clarity in a defensible way. And I think a lot of times we think that has to mean that we're spending hours and hours. It just means knowing what you do, structuring what you do, and then building out your EHR templates so that things can be dragged over if you have a scribe or even if you don't have a scribe, so that it's efficient. So what does this look like when this all works? Well, the patient comes in with signs of dry eye. Again, we recommend step 1 therapy, maybe warm compresses, tea tree oil based lid hygiene like Peak Pro. We might use TG3 MacuHealth if we like that as part of our intervention. Some people like it, as in step 1. Some people want to hold that for step 2. Again, bottom line for me is it doesn't matter as long as what you do is intentional and what you believe is more important in this step 1. Then we document that clearly. They come back in a month for an ocular surface evaluation. Now we can escalate to drops or procedures with proper codes, modifiers, and documentation, right? We've eliminated dues to step one therapy off the plate. So now if we have, prior authorizations, we have, we have to justify why we did the step two therapy, then we've already done it. We're into step two. And if we're the main provider managing a long-term complex condition, we might add on G2211, and our team member communicates it all seamlessly so the patient never feels confused or surprised. It's not just billing, it's just part of the system that you've built. And so I think the bottom line is that dry eye is one of the most rewarding, I think. When you do it well, it's one of the most rewarding and in-demand services we provide, but it only works clinically and financially if we build a structure around it. So if we're still treating dry eye like a one-off nuisance, then we're missing a bigger opportunity. And if you're thinking we need to tighten this up in our practice, that's exactly what we help with through Practice Performance Partners. Whether it's your coding, your compliance, your processes, your staff training, we help practices like yours turn great clinical care into sustainable systems that scale. Start with your documentation. That's where everything else falls into place. Thanks for listening. Check us out at practiceperformancepartners.com. And I can't wait to see you guys on the next one. Talk to you soon.